Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining us tonight is Holly Hazzard. She is the chairman of a new group called For Public Education. That is the number four, Public Education. Welcome, Holly. This is a fairly new group, and so I'm going to assume that most of our viewers are not familiar with For Public Education. So this is sort of an opportunity for you to tell us what the genesis of this organization is. How did this start, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Catherine, for giving me this forum. For Public Education was started actually about 2 weeks ago, so it's brand spanking new here in Fairfax County. And it's a group of, there are about 40 people originally who came together. And it was sort of a growing drumbeat of extreme concern about the issues that were being brought up in Loudoun County, and then to a lesser extent in Fairfax County, that seemed to be organized attacks on our school system and our school board that seemed to be bigger than the actual issues that were coming up, such as book banning or anti-CRT. And then, of course, this all sprang from Glenn Youngkin's successful election that was in no part due to his focusing on the perception that some parents didn't have as much say in schools as they ought to have. And I would say McCullough's gaffe in that election. But that just strengthened this movement against public education and for charter schools. And we became really concerned because we believe that public education is the foundation of our democracy. We need to have an educated electorate, or we are not going to have the democracy that we've had for the last 250 years.
And so just for the sake of our viewers, I will just throw some numbers out. We have 132 different school districts across the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Commonwealth of Virginia is a very large state. The rural parts of Virginia, and I am a product of Southwest Virginia. I went to Montgomery County Elementary School and Roanoke County High School, and I live here in Fairfax, and my children all went to Fairfax County school systems. So I think people need to understand that when this For Public Education is not just about Northern Virginia. There's just been a lot of focus, even nationally, on Loudoun County as sort of this lightning rod of where all of this came together. But for 50 years, more than 50 years, Virginia has had to grapple with a history of massive resistance here in this Commonwealth following Brown versus the Board of Education. And the problem with not teaching our history is that people do not understand how we arrived where we are if you don't know the history of how we got here, when whole school systems like in Prince Edward County were shut down for 4 years while taxpayer dollars funded vouchers for white children to go to a private academy. So when you hear people talking about charter schools, it means different things to different people, depending on what your experience is with the history of public education in Virginia. And so I put that out there because I think if people do not understand the history of education, not just here in Northern Virginia, but all across Virginia, it's hard to understand how some of the things that are happening are seen as a threat to the quality of public education. So when you got to tell me a little bit about your team members, who were the people that have kind of joined you in this leadership role?
Well, we've got a number of parents, and we would love to have some more parents on our team. We've got school principals, former teachers, and concerned citizens, because we think that, or some people think that, so the concerns about education should be left to parents and to the school system. But education's not about teaching children exactly what every individual parent wants them taught. Children go to school for the benefit of society, and where our schools are headed is important to every single person certainly in our county and in our Commonwealth. And I agree with you, Catherine. There's a wide disparity and a sad disparity in the level of education and certainly in the facilities that kids have throughout the Commonwealth. But the answer for that is not to be sucked into the idea or the romance that a charter school is going to fix everything. The solution to that is to invest more money in public education. And I will say that for Northern Virginia, the idea that we have a, quote, need, end quote, for charter schools at all, because there's something dysfunctional about our schools is just an absolute myth. We've got one of the best school systems in the United States of America. We've got something like 96% of our kids go on to graduate on time, go on to four-year institutions. We've got fantastic trades training for trade schools. We've got wonderful programs for children with English as a second language, for kids with EIP. So the idea that there's something broken here starts out as a false premise, but it's an important one to dig into for people who have a stake in promoting charter schools. And that, I think, is two different things. There are two reasons why this has come up. One is the charter school industry is a billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, and every dollar they could take from taxpayers and put in the pockets of these for-profit corporations, the better off for them. And we all heard about this when Betsy DeVos was the Secretary of Education. But it's not just hers. It's the Koch brothers. It's the Walton Family Foundation. There is a deep and disturbing root that has been running through this country for many, many years that we should do away with public education. Certainly by libertarians, but it's gotten traction with right-wing radical groups in recent years. And now they are infiltrating our school system and just sowing seeds of confusion and questioning the value of public schools. And it's just a false narrative.
Oh, no question. And all you have to do is Google charter schools New Orleans or charter schools Louisiana to see how that train jumped the tracks and has devastated public education in Louisiana. And to your point, the charter schools are run by for-profit businesses. They're actually publicly traded on the stock exchange. So when you think about public education as it exists now and tax dollars, and I live in Fairfax County, tax dollars that come from our real estate property taxes go to build schools, pay teachers, all of the things that are a direct, investment from the taxpayer to the public school system where you are. And charter schools take public taxpayer money, put it into charter schools that are run by corporations that are actually working to make a profit for their shareholders, because that's what capitalism is. And how people don't see the disconnect or the underlying business model of charter schools is beyond me. But I do think that is one of the hurdles in trying to help people understand how charter schools are different from the direct investment in a community by taxpayers into the teachers, the buildings, the curriculum, the extracurricular activities right where they live.
Yeah, I agree, Catherine. There's two things there that make this complicated. Of course, it's complicated, or we wouldn't be having this discussion. One is we do have 9 charter schools in the Commonwealth, and some of them are great schools. So it's not to say that you can't have a charter school that's a good school, but there are many charter schools that aren't good schools and are made for profit. And when you've got someone who's looking at doing something for profit, they're going to look at cutting costs, not building the best educational product that they can for our kids. And one analogy to this is privatizing prisons. That in Virginia and in many states, what we thought was if we could just privatize prisons, then the corporate America could do better by our prison system than the Commonwealth. And as we found in that instance, it was a disaster, and it will be a disaster if there are a large number of charter schools. But that's not to say that all charter schools are bad. But what is bad is that what you talked about segregationist Virginia and how private schools were used to sort of get around having to desegregate our schools. Charter schools claim that they are, because it's a lottery system to get, it's public funds that are used, and then it's a blind lottery system that's used to get in. But what's not spelled out is that charter schools, for example, don't have to pay for transportation. So if you're a single working mom and you've got one car that you need to get to work and you can't take your child to that charter school, you're not going to apply. If you've got a kid who's got an IEP and who needs special help, it's unlikely that you're going to apply to a school if you're trying to work with the public school system to fit that in. And there are all kinds of other costs that charter schools don't have to absorb that public schools do. And so what our group would say is, if there are problems with public schools, and of course there are problems with public schools, then we all need to work together to fix the public schools, not take the pot of money out of public schools and give them to another subgroup that's never going to solve the problem, because we're never going to have enough charter schools to educate all of our kids. So it's just a diversion, and it's a way of putting money in the pockets of some folks who don't need any more money.
You know, and I think there's also this incredibly false narrative that business is the answer for everything. And I understand that, underpinning the United States is capitalism, right? There's a business model for everything. Healthcare, education, you name it, somebody's making money. Somebody has to make money. It doesn't work unless somebody's making money. But we privatize the military. Look at all the BlackRock over, we privatize that. We privatize the prisons. Everything's going to be better if we just give it to somebody who's trying to make money off the effort. And are we really looking at impact? Are we really looking at measurable goals that tell us that what we're trying to do is being achieved by privatization? Because I don't think those measures match up with the amount of divesting in government programs, government fundings, government agencies, so that we can just outsource everything to business people. I think that is just such a false thing, that culturally in the United States, we've been led to believe that business people can do everything better than government. Am I wrong?
No, and you're spot on. And one of the dangers in Virginia now is that there's a bill in the legislature, I think it's been killed, that will allow lab schools as charter schools. And that, sounds very sexy, that we're going to have universities that are going to be in partnership with these schools to use the expertise that you might have in a university to educate kids. And that sounds like fantastic, but what they're doing is expanding the folks who can get involved in lab schools to include businesses. And so you may have, and I'm making this up, but you have Home Depot, who is may decide they want to have a charter school, or Amazon. Amazon is going to be looking for workers. So do we really want Amazon educating our high school students and deciding that philosophy or music or arts is not something they need in their workforce? And so they are going to, quote, educate people, but they're educating workers. And of course, I fully commend and respect that students need to learn the things they need to learn to get a job. But there are a whole lot of other things that our public education teaches people that are not quite so cause and effect. And if we lose that, we lose public education.
I agree. And after this break, we're going to talk about things like pedagogy and curriculum and why they matter. So please join us after the break here on Your Need to Know.
Maria, so how's work?
It was fourth period biology. Our students just weren't getting how easily viruses spread. So Miss Bell and I had them role play a zombie virus outbreak. By the time they had all learned the lesson, all the living were dead. Hey, how's your job going?
That big sales meeting I planned? Next year, I might get to go.
Cool.
Caitlin, be serious. Now take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Freedom. It's at the core of who we are. The freedom to live without fear, to jog where we please, to wear a hoodie. The freedom to breathe. Before we celebrate the freedom most Americans have, we must fight for the freedom all Americans deserve. Because all lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Holly Hazzard. She is the chair of For Public Education, a brand new group that hopes to shed light on some of the things that we need to be looking at as Virginians when we think about investment in public education. So when we went to the break, I was talking about pedagogy and curriculum. These things have been developed over decades. The best ways to educate children, the development of curriculum that meets students where they are. And we have a diverse population of students in our public school system. And we ask our teachers to go to university to get a degree, not just in a math, but also in education, to be certified to teach. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, parents should have a say about what goes on in the classroom. Parents should have a say in what is taught in the classroom. And the fact of the matter is, professionals are in our classrooms. And despite the fact they're not paid that way or get the respect they deserve, educational professionals, teachers, have been educated to do this job, just like any other professional. And so I ask you, how should we answer this idea that every parent should be able to have a say in what is taught in their children's classroom, Holly?
Well, that brings up kind of a bit of a sticky wicket for parents and for citizens. And, in the end, of course, we want people who are professionals to teach our children, just like we want surgeons to perform surgery. But parents should have a say. But it's a myth that they don't have a say. And I regret that this has become politicized, that somehow parents are on the outside looking in. I volunteered in my kids' classroom once a week when they were little. I saw what was going on in the classroom. The school board meetings, as we know, are open for every parent to have a say. There are all kinds of committees, curriculum committees that parents are not only can be on, but are welcome to be on. Schools do not want to be separate from the culture of their community. Schools want to build on the culture of their community. So it's nonsensical to suggest that parents don't already have a say. But this is part of this quest to create conflict and create division, so that people will look at public schools and begin to support something else.
And people do have choices. In other words, there are plenty of people who homeschool their children, send them to private schools, send them to parochial schools. There is a wide swath of opportunities for parents to decide how they want their children to be educated. But there is a commitment to a community to educate all children. And especially here in Northern Virginia, we have a very diverse population. We have a lot of people coming into our communities who are new to this country, who don't speak English as their first language. And so public education has a commitment to invest education, quality education for every single child that walks through their doors. And so not all parents participate equally either.
Right. And, and the thing is, Karen, the point of education is not to create little mini me's who are an exact replica of their parents. Children are not owned by their parents. Certainly, parents have absolutely the most impact on a child growing up. But the reason that we can create a democracy and we can create justice and that we have freedom in this country is that children come to a common place and work together to create a common sense of what our culture is and what our country is. And that is actually a fundamental purpose of public education. So the idea that a really small and very vocal minority of parents can come into our public school meetings and yell and perform and wear masks and shout profanities, and that somehow their voice is more important than the voices of the quiet, respectful, decent parents who are working every day and putting their kids through school, it's just a false narrative.
And so what does your group hope to do with a platform, with a voice, with participation to try to balance this ship?
Well, one thing that we want to do, and we would like to begin doing it before the 2022 election, is to remind people how important it is that education has been a nonpartisan issue in this country. It has not been a Democrat or Republican issue. Republicans and Democrats together, we want to stand together as parents in our school to educate our children. And it should not be some biased issue that we've got to jump on one bandwagon or another. And that's what these groups are trying to do. They're trying to make it some dissonance between political parties. And We want none of that. We are neither Democrats nor Republicans. We are citizens who believe in public education. But that's one strategy. So we want to raise this issue that there's dark money involved in the groups that are purporting to be individual, in many of the individual parents standing up as grassroots groups. And the goal is to break apart public education. And the goal for some is to split this into public education is a Democrat issue and charter schools is a Republican issue. And we cannot allow ourselves, regardless of our political views, we cannot allow ourselves to be bought into this. And this, incidentally, we've been here before. In the 70s, the radical right figured out that they could come together and take over our churches in this way. And I don't know if I'm old enough to remember when churches were nonpartisan and really were not involved in politics. And then if anyone's old enough to remember Ralph Reed and the Christian Coalition, that was really the beginning of some people using churches as tools to push their political agenda, because they saw there was this big pot of people in churches that they could then not sway, but to take the issues that were important to them and to build them up as the most important issues, and then to split this country into different political factions. That's not, in my way of thinking, the way to have a healthy religion in this country. Schools, there's a much bigger pot of people with a lot, I would say a lot more at stake. Perhaps others would disagree, but at least certainly a significant amount at stake. And if we allow our schools to be used as political tools by either party, we're making a terrible, terrible mistake for our country.
So we have a new governor, we have a new Secretary of Education, and one of the things they did last week was basically strip everything related to diversion, equity, and inclusion out of public education policy. Like, it just doesn't exist anymore. You know, they've decided that racism is over, and they're just going to declare that no one's going to be judged by the color of their skin or their gender, or, you know, and that settles that. And I don't know how the rest of our community, and I'm sure there are people who have thoughts on both sides, but it seems to me a tremendous setback. Delegate Gian Ward stood up and said in a speech on the floor of the General Assembly is that, you know, Black children also have hurt feelings, and Black children are also harassed and bullied in school and have been for a long time. And there is no tip line for them to call up and report that. And in it, to me, that was a stark statement about the lens through which we are looking at who is served and how families and children are served. The whole point of diversity, equity, and inclusion was to open the door wider, to include more people, to include more perspectives, just inclusive. That means more. Everybody understands more, gets more, there is more. So, you know, how does your group look at the fact that equity has now just been struck from education policy in Virginia?
Yeah, that was a very disturbing day in what was a very disturbing week for many reasons. Again, these groups that have been waiting for this moment for a long time use words like indoctrination and the fear that white children are going to experience. And it's creating a narrative that almost rings true. But if people would just sit back and think about it, there's no possibility that it's true. To teach about the slavery of our past to children, whatever their color or race, is teaching about our American history. It's not teaching about Black history. And you know, as the saying goes, those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. And so the idea that this is quote indoctrinating, end quote, and I'm using that word because it's used all the time in trying to split us apart on these issues. The idea that's indoctrinating our children is just almost laughable. It's like saying to me, I'm of German descent, that I should not learn about Hitler because somehow I'm going to get my feelings hurt. It is just nonsensical to suggest that white children cannot sit in a room and learn about the difficulty of our past sitting next to Black children, African-American children, brown children, and all learn together both about the great things that this country's done, but then also about some of the dark recesses of our past. And it's insulting to our children and to what we all believe they're capable of, to suggest that they are so fragile that they can't take this. And also it's insulting to teachers to suggest that the only way to teach is to make children feel badly. People did not go into teaching to make children feel badly, and they would not be in teaching if that was what they were doing.
Exactly. And you know, talking about curriculum and pedagogy. So I actually studied Virginia history in fourth grade in the 1970s, early 1970s, you know, and I love Virginia. And, you know, my family's been here for centuries, and I love Thomas Jefferson. I loved him so hard, and I still love him so hard. But, you know, at that point, no one knew who Sally Hemings was. We did not talk about slavery at Monticello. It was not taught to us at all that, you know, there was a whole economy that was built in Virginia on the backs of enslaved people. It was just about Thomas Jefferson and UVA, the Declaration of Independence, and all the marvelous things he did. Well, teaching the underbelly, the undergirding of his story does not take one thing away from him. The things he achieved, the things that he did, it does not. But we need a fuller picture of what the reality was. And I think all Virginians, including, you know, the descendants of enslaved people, deserve that too. And again, to me, it's about adding. I don't see that there's harm. I see that the more we understand, the more we embrace who we are, that we can understand that people are complicated. People in the past were complicated. People today are complicated. Two things can coexist at the same time. People are complicated. So we've got a minute left. What opportunities are available for people to find out and engage with your organization, Holly?
Well, first, we'd love to have people volunteer as advocates or to assist us with our outreach, or we've got all kinds of needs, and we just love to have people engaged and involved. I mean, the best thing to do is to go to our website, which is forpubliceducation.org, or our Facebook page or Twitter page, which is for Public Education. And we would just love to see anyone who's interested in promoting the future of public education in Fairfax, in Virginia, and really in the nation to join with us in this, hopefully this budding movement.
Well, I think people being involved in public education, my kids are grown, they're in their 30s, but all of us have a commitment, should be invested in the quality of schools in our communities, because it only enriches, you know, our quality of life wherever any of us live in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So thank you very much, Holly, for being here. And for those of you at home, this is what you need to know. And for past episodes of Your Need to Know, they are available on YouTube, and you can find them on the Inside Scoop TV channel on YouTube. So go back and listen to some of the shows that we've done.